Okay, so welcome everybody to Remote Rehab Community Network's first ever podcast. I'm so excited. It's unbelievable. And the podcast is called Through My Eyes and In My Shoes. I'm Leanna Luxton and I'm co-founder of the Remote Rehab Community Network. And Through My Eyes and In My Shoes is a podcast that looks at the journey we take with our guests as they look at their past, present and future thinking about a topic and their hopes and dreams for the future. So we have an informal chat. We know each other from many different meetings, but I wanted to introduce you guys to the OT sisters. So Suzy and Jaimee, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, I'll let you go first, Jaimee. Okay, so I'm Jaimee. I am an occupational therapist in Fort Worth, Texas, USA. I got my master's degree in occupational therapy, and then I went on to get a doctorate in occupational therapy so that I could do a little bit more research in the field and just further my knowledge. I've been working since school with people with stroke and traumatic brain injury, pretty much any acquired brain injury, and I work with them every day in a clinic setting. I love it so much. It's really neat getting to be a part of their journey and getting to be such a big piece of that journey and getting them back to work or back to life. I do research as well. It tends to be more clinical research. I specialize in low vision, and so a lot of my research tends to be in low vision. But then also Suzy and I, we team up and do a lot of research together, and she can talk more about it, but specifically in health and apps.
Okay, excellent.
And I'm Suzy. I'm also an occupational therapist, hence the OT sisters. I've practiced for about 7 years, and now I'm doing more research and academics. But we started this OT Sisters journey together. We started a social media account and we're trying to take that off at the same time too, where we can really use this virtual platform to help reach more people and extend those opportunities for people to continue working on their own rehabilitation after, what happens after therapy runs out, or even right now in the age of COVID, where there's not everybody has the options or are afforded those opportunities.
I know. And how long have you guys been qualified, and how long have you been in stroke and etc. and all that?
So I've been in OT since early 2012, and I started out in home health care, and then really started focusing in on stroke and brain injury after a couple of years. So I've been focusing more on that. You've been?
Yeah, I've been in OT since 2015, and I've been working in stroke and brain injury rehab ever since I graduated, and I only maybe a couple of years after I started specializing, so I'm certified brain injury specialist as well.
And what made you get into OT? What was your inspiration?
I would say for me, it was several life experiences that happened. My mom is a special education, or our mom is a special education teacher. So we were always around the lots of therapies and special education and people with special needs while we were growing up. We've had family members who have had strokes or other injuries, and it's just this accumulation. I think I'm speaking for you too, but just this accumulation of life events that really gave us this opportunity to see OT and what occupational therapy was, and just find an interest in it. So we just happened to both go the same direction.
I know, imagine you went different ways. I think it's really interesting that your family can have such a big impact on you. I know my dad, do you know much about football in the UK?
Some. My husband does a lot.
Oh, okay. We can say my dad was a big Arsenal fan, and I wanted to be a physio, to be like Arsenal's physio. And then obviously when I got into it, I kind of realized MSK maybe wasn't as interesting, and then specialized in stroke. But I didn't even know about stroke rehabilitation, I was all about sports. So it's really interesting how our families and our upbringings can really impact on that. So the reason why I asked you to be the first guest on the podcast was because, like you said, of your Instagram. I followed you and I saw all your amazing hints and tips. And one of them that really struck out was around the remote rehab and the telehealth. And I started to really think, okay, I really want to have a conversation with these girls because they speak my language. So what made you want to start your Instagram, and what's your rationale behind it?
Well, I would say what really, both of us working with people who've had stroke and brain injury, we just see when the therapy runs out, or people who don't have, at least, and we are more familiar, of course, with the healthcare system in the United States, but we see all of the problems that people run into and these barriers that keep them from getting care. So how can we create something that people can find and just use these tips in their everyday life? It's giving just tips and tricks. Like if somebody wants to call an OT, not everybody knows an OT, but hey, maybe you have a question, we're able to give you that information.
And simplified enough too that it's not like, you know, you like Google things and they give you like these really broad ideas, or like these ideas that are like, you know, in medical lingo that people can't even pull apart. Even I can't understand half of it. So, you know, we have to figure out a way that we can actually, like Suzy said, reach people and help them long-term, you know, keep getting better, because we know it's a journey. It'll continue. It's a long-term thing. And so, you know, the more that we can help them pick up little tools for their toolkit along the way, the more that we're all working together and helping people.
And I really think people should have a therapist as well. It's not just for the patients. There's loads of little tips around how to rehabilitate yourself in all different types of ways. And I've used some with my patients, so I really appreciate it. And they're in, I know, and all little bite-sized chunks. And sometimes it's also how you articulate things is really good. So with that being said, we are focusing today on the telehealth topic. And the way Through My Eyes and In My Shoes works is we think about your past thinking, your current thinking, and your future thinking, or your hopes and dreams. So if we start with the kind of past thinking, so what was your past thinking in relation to remote rehab? So how long have you been doing it? What was in your toolkit, and what did it look like back in the day, as they say?
I think for me, right out of school, you know, we learned a little bit. I remember learning a little bit about telehealth, but it seemed like so far off into the future. You know what I mean? It almost seemed like untouchable. And we were just talking and kind of, you know, discussing for the podcast. There wasn't a ton of legislation around, you know, reimbursement for telehealth, and Suzy can speak more to that. But you know, it seemed further off, and it seemed like there wasn't a ton of opportunity, at least in the United States, for telehealth, and seemed like a neat opportunity, but something to me that was so kind of far off. But then also always, I guess, always thinking about how helpful like apps could be was something that I knew in practice and that we were using, but it was different than it is currently. I think the pandemic has changed a lot. It's been a total mind shift since, like, you know, April. So it's changed a lot, but you know, we'd use it as a mini adjunct maybe to therapy, but not as in big of a role as it is now.
So when you had it as a mini adjunct, what type of apps were you using, and what did it really look like then?
In the clinic, a lot of times we would use sometimes like self-management apps. It would be more like, you know, like a diabetes management app, or scheduling, or alarms, you know, some of the more basic apps, even like brain games, you know, things so that you can have like cognitive maintenance long-term. So that's pretty much what it would look like in the clinic.
And how were your patients with it?
Mixed bag. Some people really liked it. Some people didn't. I think it really depends on some people's experience with technology. And how much they previously used it, what their current abilities are to problem solve and to use their phone was a big piece of how much they were accepting, you know, the app use. But for the most part, people were pretty interested in it. They saw it as kind of a a new age technology, I guess.
I know, because most people think about it with like the virtual reality or the like, it's like bionic. But it's really interesting to hear that it was just simple. Like I know with my patients in the UK, you may kind of point them to a Headspace app, or you may point them to an app that helps with scheduling, or even just say use your calendar on your phone or your alarm on your phone. But you didn't really, I know I didn't really think about it in terms of an adjunct to my rehabilitation, definitely. So and that's really interesting, I think, looking at how things are now. So with your current thinking, how has that changed? It's so interesting to have two of you, because you're like, who's watching?
Well, I'll talk, and my experiences are a little bit different, but and I know you've had more of that traditional telehealth experience that you should totally talk about too. But yeah, while we're on the mHealth, like at least the way I used to think about it, it was, yes, it was really far away, but also like especially around apps where they're not really getting one-on-one treatment from an OT, but like you're still getting the information. I know some people are always kind of weary of that, like, are they giving away like our careers or our jobs, and are we giving away all the tricks? And
There'll be like robots coming in, like, hello.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. But the more that I've been engaged in like app development and really seeing the side of how can we make this to not only help like practitioners, like therapists, OTs, PTs, speech therapists become stronger therapists through the technology that's out there, through like mHealth, like mobile health apps, but also just giving people with stroke or brain injury tools to take it further and really take more on themselves. It really helps them become the manager of their recovery. So currently, in my mind, even though the pandemic has been a real challenge, it's opened up a lot of doors. The infrastructure, the technology infrastructure was there, just wasn't being used like it is now. And it really pushed us and excelled us forward. So I think we're going to see a lot of technology, like we already are seeing technology coming out in the form of telehealth and mHealth and eHealth and all these different terminology that's out there, alphabet soup, right? We're seeing so much come out right now it's really exciting. And I think it's going to be a really great opportunity, especially when we see we can only give so many hours of therapy a day. So inpatient rehab, at least here in the United States, is 3 hours a day. Skilled nursing is 1 hour a day. But how many hours of the day are there still where not a lot's going on? Like, how can you give people the tools? So, and we know time and repetition is so important too. So how can we give them the tools so they can use their time and have more repetition of whatever it might be that's meaningful to them?
Yeah, and I definitely feel that the exact same way. On the Remote Rehab Community Network, we're talking about the concept of 24-hour rehabilitation. So we have a standard where you would give your patients 45 minutes of each therapy a day. And sometimes they're not even getting that due to the strain on services, especially with COVID. We had this instance where there was no strokes. It was like, no one's having a stroke. And then, oh my God, everyone's had a stroke. It was like, as people started wanting to access health services again. And then what happened is, you give, like you said, all the barriers are taken down. So we weren't really even allowed to have people's email addresses. We weren't allowed to message them, like a text message had to be off your work phone. All these doors have been blown open. And you're now even like your WhatsApp video calling your patient, like, how are you? And so actually, it's really interesting to think of the hands off being a way to enhance the 24-hour rehab. So how are you doing your exercises and embedding that into your routine outside of those 45 minutes? And if you can't do it, then how effective is our rehabilitation going to be if they're relying on us coming in I mean, in the UK, it can be once a week in a community service. How is that having how is that meant to have a positive impact? So that's really interesting. And I think as well, so even though I am the founder of this network, I'm not the biggest fan of apps. And this is really because I'm really interested in what it is about the app that makes someone use it. So I've downloaded, I don't know, every single fitness app, every single meditation app, because I need health. I need health. I need self-love. And then I won't use them because I've you know, the next step is the action. So what kind of hints and tips do you have for people in helping their patients, their clients, anybody to use the app if it's going to be beneficial, if it's like the next stage of their therapy?
I think we can both split it and talk about it a little bit, but I think it's a lot of it's making sure that the app is fit to the person and not necessarily just giving them a cookie cutter app, because in helping them to be a part of selecting that app. Like I had a gentleman who I worked with who had severely uncontrolled diabetes, and we need to get him on a really good track to prevent more strokes and just to improve his health overall. And he didn't have experience using a phone. He disdained writing down a diabetes log. He was not about it. And so we found a really simple app on his phone. We went through like several of them. We downloaded like at least 5 apps, and he chose which one he liked. We trained it, we worked on it until it became more ingrained. And it's kind of like one of those things, like they have to really have that initial buy-in. In my experience, they have to have that initial buy-in and really be motivated and, have those supports, like having support in therapy, having their family or their doctor, give them that positive reinforcement, whatever support they need. And then that helps foster that long-term use, rather than just throwing an app at them and saying, hey, use this to track your blood sugar. I would be like, oh, where do I start? But if it's supported and you kind of lay the foundation, it's a hopeful thing that they can build upon that and continue to use that.
I think you brought up some really good points about discontinuing app use. I don't remember the number now, but it's a huge number, like over 75%.
I'm one of them.
You download them and then most people use them once or delete them right away and don't even use them ever. We did a review study actually, and we've done a couple different studies on app use since we're kind of just talking more about apps, where we wanted to see more about why are people deleting these apps and not using those who are deleting apps. And it's really interesting to look at discontinuing use from ads and nuisances. And then we even with us going through the app store and looking through the different apps that are out there. Oh my gosh, just thinking about the accessibility of the apps and the background, and if there's any visual problems or even motor challenges, how do you operate this? And there's just a lot of problems, barriers that are there too. So I think what Jaimee said is really working with them and making it part of therapy and trying to ingrain it, and if it's right for them. And it's not going to be right for everybody. Absolutely. So, but it is an option for those that it is right for. I think it's a good option.
Definitely. And I think as well, for me, it seems like, and this is where my thinking is changing, is that is it worth myself as a therapist investing the time in understanding what the app does? Because you, as if you're going to market an app to a patient, you're going to be like, right, this app does this app does that, this app does this. And in the UK, I don't think we even know what apps there are out there to even then have the discernment to say this one fits you, or this one wouldn't fit you because of XYZ. So I know within our community, we're trying to go through some apps to give people different ideas of what the app is, but how do we encourage therapists to start even investigating the apps, because it's people that are not even there yet?
Right. You've kind of worked, I know you've kind of worked with some, getting an app group your work.
Yeah, we had me and one of the speech therapists, we ran an app group together. And so we would download some different apps and we would try it out with the patients. We do it once a week for 30 minutes and we'd try it and we'd have them kind of review it and be like, so what did you think? Is this something that you would use again? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Would you revisit it? And so we would take note of it that way and kind of learn some of the apps that way. Another thing that we had worked on previously was doing, and as part of that review, was seeing what apps were out there that were evidence-based, because there's not a ton out there that have strong evidence. Actually, there's minimal that have strong evidence behind them. And so, as therapists, that's kind of limiting if we only have a few options that we know are going to be effective or really good apps, and say and do what they intend to do, what they say they intend to do. And so we have to be careful about using evidence-based apps, but if there's not very many, it limits our options.
What would you say your top 2 apps are? I was going to say one, but I want more than one. One example.
Let's see. I tend to use just not like okay. First, not to be like self-serving, but one of the apps that I've been working on with a team. It's a home safety assessment app, and we're actually working on creating a version for people who have any impairments or disability to actually complete on their own. We have a professional version that's being tested now, but the next step that we're working on is creating one that can be used for by people with disabilities or their caregivers or maybe a handyman, so anything around home safety. So I think that's really great. There's also one that I found in a review. I think it's called Starfish.
Okay.
Which sounds kind of funny, but it was actually really cool. It's a physical activity app, and you get a little fish, and then the more steps you take, like the fish will float to the top and blow bubbles, and then you can get, it's all about rewards, and it gives rewards for physical activity, and we know how important that is for stroke recovery. So I think anything that's motivating and kind of fun and I like that one. So what about you?
Well, honestly, I kind of keep it simple. Most times with just like the very basics that are already like integrated in the phone. Like I love the calendar app and just like really learning that. And those basic alarms are pretty much my bread and butter when I'm thinking about a phone. But there was this one app one time, I can't think of the name of it, but it was you plant a tree every time that you're trying to focus on something. And so we would work on that with some of my guys who had a more challenging time with attention and concentrating on something. And it was really like kind of like that, that motivation, like you were talking about, like the reward to continue to focus on something for an extended period of time. And not be as distracted. And so then you stop it, once you stop the task, but your goal is to build this beautiful tree for like every 15 minutes or 30 minutes or something that you've been working. So that was kind of a neat app that I really liked.
Oh, that's really cool. There wouldn't even be ones that I think that you guys would say. So that's really, really interesting. And I think I'm not going to be self-serving either, but I know in the remote rehab community, we're developing an app for upper limb rehab, and I'm definitely going to cast it past your guys' eyes because it seems that you guys know a lot about apps, which I didn't know. And the other thing is, I think it'd be really cool if we post your reviews with this podcast so that people can access the articles that you've written, and because we all want to learn more. Great. So, and I know I'm going to ask you one more thing about your current thinking. So one of the things that there's 2 things actually. So one of the things that I'm really trying to push forward in the UK is around thinking of telehealth in more of a blended approach. So we're having a lot of discussions where telehealth is seen as either you're doing everything remotely or you're hands-on and you're going in, and it's really difficult for people to flip-flop between the two or think about what they must do face-to-face versus what they can do via telehealth or via an app or etc. Is that something you're finding in the US, or is it much more integrated into your everyday practice?
I think it's I completely agree with the blended approach. I really am a big fan of that one. I think so in April, when all of this COVID stuff happened, at my clinic, they said, I was like Monday or Tuesday, they said, hey, we have to go telehealth starting next Monday, and we want to be seamless transition for the patient. So come Monday, we're all going telehealth, and it's got to be a smooth transition for everybody. Everybody's got to have a schedule. They've got to be ready. They better, they have to learn how to get into Skype for Business. And it was a whirlwind, right? But so we got it all figured out. We were able to get it all taken care of. But the tricky part was it was 100% remote. It was 100% telehealth. And that took a lot of creativity. And I think, I was concerned about some of the outcomes from just doing it that way, especially for some of my more physically demanding patients, like somebody who has an arm that needs manual help, needs some skilled manual assistance, or maybe like even for a physical therapist, somebody who needs like some skilled gait training. It's really hard to do that hands off, really hard. And so that's challenging, but I think once we came back, it was awesome because then I could be more hands-on and all this stuff, but we still have, I think, like Suzy was saying, some of this stuff really opened the doors for us to see, the efficacy of some of this remote work. And so we have some patients now who do a little bit of both, which is kind of awesome. One thing that I really liked about seeing going into telehealth was seeing people in their natural environment, seeing their home, and getting to see, there was a woman who I got to get to meet with her family every time and do family education. We don't get to do that in the clinic, so she had her family there with her. We got to see a snapshot of what life looked like in her actual environment, and a lower structure environment, somewhere that's not like within the four walls of the clinic, which was really neat. You get to see a little bit more about their culture. So that was cool. But then also it's nice to have them within bounds of the clinic so you can do more hands-on work and more focused work. And so I think a blended approach is a beautiful thing. But it's interesting though. Definitely think about it one way or the other, but I would.
Definitely. And the second thing was around how much my communication skills, you wouldn't think it now, but my communication skills have developed by doing things with telehealth. I didn't realize how much I talked with my hands as a therapist. So I wouldn't necessarily be like, okay, if we move this leg here, then I'd just be, physically, I'll be having a chat, but physically kind of going, da, 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 put your hair, da, da. And explaining exercises when you're not able to physically maneuver somebody. And then also just the conversational rehab element. So how their mindset is and their goals and their optimism and their hopes, etc. You end up having quite a different conversation, because instead of why didn't you do exercises, it's like, if you don't do your exercise then I'm not there, like what we can. And actually, are you ready to do this? Do you want to do this? Like all those mindset things start coming into it a lot more, I've noticed. And I don't know what you guys think about that, or have you noticed that as well?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me, just having those different conversation. I mean, it's just such a different setting, so it makes a lot of sense. So I think, I don't know if it's going to add much to it, but so I think that just kind of like really supports that blended approach that you're talking about with it too, because then you can have both of those and understand that there's a benefit in both types of conversations. So
yeah, definitely. Okay.
Something interesting, kind of like you were saying, like people have to they like almost have to be present, and are you ready to start? Like, are you in a good spot to start? Kind of what you were saying, because I guess there's something, I hadn't really thought about it like that, but I guess there's something about, suiting up and coming to therapy. That's your starting point. So you're ready to go versus, if you're at home hanging on the couch, I guess it's 3:00. I guess I better do my OT now. It's a little different. It's a little less motivating. It's kind of like going to the gym. Like once you're there, that's half the battle. And then you just get started versus, if you're at home, Netflix looks a lot better than like my exercise apps, So it is interesting thinking about it in those terms.
And you don't know as a therapist, like, I was having this debate with one of my colleagues because they were like, they just can't do it if I'm not there. And I was like, okay, let's think about this really logically. Like, how disempowered is somebody if the only time they can help themselves is when you're there? Like, let's not think about what they can't do because you're not there. Let's think about what they can do when you're not there. Give them that, whatever that is. It could be just like marching your feet on the spot. Can you actually commit to that? Because if you can commit to that 3 times a day, then I know where your mindset is. Okay, you've done that. High five. Let's acknowledge that. Let's praise that. Let's give you all the witnessing around that. And then let's move on, you know. And actually all those, I've been really noticing it with my clients all the time, when you're witnessing their achievements and acknowledging that they've done 99% of that on their own. You've just been there going, oh, I think you might want to try this, mate, and they've achieved it, versus me going in and going, right, let's tackle the stairs, let's do this together, we've done it together, this is the only way we can do it together. Like, well, where you go at the end, they're like, where are you going? How am I meant to do the rest of my life? And actually seeing how they set themselves up. So I may have someone and we're like, right, we're going to do some chair exercises, so you need to be here and set up your computer, blah blah. And if they're set up and they're ready to go, to me that's like, okay, you heard me, you understood, you were on board, we're ready to go, I'm proud of you, let's get going. And it for me, that was just really interesting change. Then because I'm a community therapist, so when I'm going in, I'm like, come on, let's get ready. Where's your exercise sheet? Where's shall we go in? Shall we? And you're kind of jollying them along. So I'm using all these English terms, but like you're moving, along with their therapy rather than them taking ownership. Basically, is my long-winded way of saying that. But have you got, because you guys are mainly in clinics, or are you out and about as well?
You are?
Yeah, I'm in a clinic.
Yeah, I'm more in academia now, but I did a lot of home health out in the community too. So.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're moving into the future now. So how do you think things are going to go with remote rehab, telehealth? I've learned new things: M-health, e-health, home health. I've learned it all from you guys today. So I'm going to be using those a lot. But how do you see it moving in the future, and what are your hopes and dreams in terms of where stroke rehabilitation, brain injury rehabilitation moves forward in this arena?
I think that we've started on this path and this trajectory, and I don't think we're going to slow down. To me, it seems like, from what I know of what technology is out there and how it's evolving, and these different really innovative people, therapists, healthcare providers, engineers, all of these really interdisciplinary teams that are taking it and running with it, I think it's just going to keep evolving and keep improving. And I'm really excited about what that will look like in the future.
I agree fully. I think that, we're starting to see some of the benefits of it early, where we can reach people who we may not have reached before. For instance, I have people who may be out of the clinic due to COVID exposure, or maybe they're just sick, or maybe they have a family issue that they can't come in, but maybe we can give them a day of telehealth therapy instead. Or, people like, I think Suzy had brought up earlier, there might be somebody who's really remote who may not have access to OTPT speech after their stroke, and they have to rely on just, whatever kind of means that they can think of, or Dr. Google, to get them going again. But if we can reach them, that's a huge difference. And I think that, like Suzy said, we have a lot of the technology. Now we have a little bit more of that foundation set up that we can just build upon and continue to grow.
Definitely, I agree. And it's interesting because a lot of people think of telehealth as causing more disparity in terms of opportunity and access. And it's interesting to think about it in terms of the energy it takes to go to an appointment, the travel cost, the energy cost, people taking time off work, etc., versus being at home. And also in the rural areas, I know that there's been a lot of talk about that. But I think in the UK, there is still this issue with Wi-Fi connection. Is it across the world? Is it across the globe? People not having access to technology. Do you guys loan out any technology to your clients, or do they have to have access to tablets or laptops or smartphones, etc., to access telehealth?
When we did telehealth, it was all through their own devices.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there wasn't, if they didn't have a phone, unfortunately, they couldn't participate. And that's unfortunate. You know, it was just kind of, I think, the way of the rushed system that we had. But yeah, I know that would be a beneficial thing is sending what a neat idea, sending somebody an iPad so that they could do therapy, you know, from home. Or
well, and then one thing I think of too, and I read the study, it was a while ago, but it was talking about how some populations that tend to be more marginalized anyways are going to actually be more likely to have a smartphone than like a desktop computer. So I think as we continue evolving our technology and being able to get a lot of those like a teleconference app or whatever it is onto a smartphone, great. But then that comes with a whole nother set of issues like monitoring data and the cost of that. But I think we can think back to the future direction. I think that those thoughts are out there, and how can we reach more people? But yeah, we definitely have the same issues as far as connectivity in some of our rural areas, and being able to reach everybody. So
yeah, it is difficult, but I think moving forward, now we've opened ourselves up to this whole new world. It's almost like you're going backwards to think about, okay, I'm not gonna do this anymore. I think it would be a real backward step for everybody. Definitely. And I know you guys were talking about, I know you don't like to be self-promoting, but this is the opportunity to promote yourselves, because you guys are doing so much research work, you're developing your own products, you've got your Instagram. Like, what, with all of those things happening, where do you see yourselves? What type of brand do you want? What's your vision?
Yeah. So with OT Sisters, it's so much fun because we get to combine two things we love, like family and then also our work and working with people who have stroke and brain injury. And so our hope is that we can continue to grow our OT Sisters Instagram account and just provide more tips out there. We also have a website, and we've been working on trying to figure out exactly what that is. We did create basically
like
a tracking tool where you self-report where you're at. We create this custom report for you, and then if you do it year by year, then you can kind of see how that changes over time. We realized that there really wasn't anything like that out there, and we work with people who benefit from that. And then we're also working on toying with the idea of creating some video recording courses, basically for different OT related topics that people might be interested in, that they could access on their own. Kind of tips and tricks for doing your own rehab. So that's in the works and coming soon.
Beautiful. I'd really, really, really like to invite you into the network. It's free to access, and the amount of knowledge you guys have in terms of your developing your products and all the information you have around different apps and everything. We have therapists from across the world. We've got some from Taiwan, Australia, America, Canada, the UK, and we're all having so much really different conversations. So we're not having your typical rehabilitation conversations in there. So yeah, I'd really invite you guys to come in, because I know that our listeners, our followers, everyone would want to know about your research, your app, your page, everything like that, and to share it themselves. So yeah, I'm so glad that you guys decided to do this podcast. I think you've given during that so many different hints and tips and valuable knowledge. So I really, really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you for inviting us. We've had a really good time doing this.
Good.
It's a pleasure talking to you.
No, thank you. And so the guys can find you on your Instagram, OT Sisters. Is your website OT Sisters?
It is.
Excellent. It's all
and you can just find the link through our Instagram page or go to the website directly.
Lovely. Okay, so Thank you so much to both of you, and I hope that you'll come again and talk to me about all different types of topics as we move through. Our next webinar podcast is with Mike and Lynette Ray, who are talking about their Braintastic exercise foundation. You know those guys? Yeah.
No, this is great.
Okay.
No, I like it.
No, have a look at them on Instagram, and they're going to be talking about rehabilitation mindset. So Mike had a stroke quite a while ago, and he was a mindset coach, a massive entrepreneur, had a stroke that affected his speaking ability, and he's rehabilitated himself, and the journey they've been on as a family is amazing. And now they're using that information to help other stroke survivors. So it's really inspiring story. So we're going to be talking to them next time. And just to say that the Remote Rehab community, you can find us on www.rrc.life. You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and our email contact@rrc.life. We have free to access webinars throughout the whole year. So we've got a lot going on in the community, and we are doing an app of the month at the minute. So that's really exciting. So thank you all, both of you, for being here, and thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.